Greetings, friends. It is Monday, August 4th here on the Wolverine. We are live every Monday night here at 6 p.m., except for the times we aren't. We'll, of course, let you know that ahead of time. But we are in it now, so we're planning on sticking to the schedule a little bit more. Anthony Broom here with Clayton Safey, Chris Ballas. The gang's all here. And, folks, fall camp is underway. Pads went on over the weekend. The team reported early last week. Practice officially started last Wednesday. We've had a chance to talk to coordinators over the weekend. Clayton and I talked to a handful of players today inside Schembechler Hall, and there'll be a couple more opportunities this week to talk to both players and coaches. So, fellas, we are squarely back in football season.
Can't wait, except I can, because we still got 4 weekends, I think, or 3 weekends before football, if I'm not mistaken. So before Michigan football, we got week 0, of course, but really it starts when Michigan starts for me. So excited. I'm really excited that we are getting players, coaches, hearing a lot of coach speak, but at the same time, we picked up a lot of stuff over the summer that people are really verifying in some of these interviews. I was up in the Upper Peninsula until yesterday and had a great time up there, but I was watching from afar, wrote a couple articles on some of the stuff that you guys got. And I thought that it seems to me like these guys are pretty high on this team, really excited about what they accomplished this summer. Again, we won't know until that first game, until we see them in pads, but it sounds like the weight gains and everything else, they're right where they want to be. So I can't wait to see these guys in action, fellas.
Yeah, it looks like, looking at it here, the week 0 games are Iowa State, Kansas State in Dublin, Idaho State, UNLV, Fresno State, Kansas, Sam Houston State, Western Kentucky, Stanford, Hawaii. So a little appetizer, but yeah, that first weekend is an incredible slate. And then week 2, you get Michigan, Oklahoma in Norman, a matchup that a lot of people can envision still. Like, it's like the Texas game last year. I couldn't really picture it until we actually saw Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers and Gunnar Helm and all those guys on the field at the Big House. And it was like, okay, this new era of college football is happening. But
it was a letdown, unfortunately.
That game was very disappointing from a Michigan standpoint. But 0-0 now. Everyone's undefeated, and college football rapidly approaching.
Any of those games you're going to watch, Anthony, on week 0?
Did you say it was Kansas State, Iowa State in Dublin?
Yes. That is at noon on ESPN from Aviva Stadium in Dublin.
I'm not going to block out my Saturday for that, but if I happen to be around, that's a good, I'm down for that, but that would be the only game I take in.
Well, Matt Campbell was going to be the next Michigan coach, right?
That's so 5 years ago. We may as well bring up Les Miles and
Les Miles.
Some people wanted him. That was legit. But no, the Hawaii game, Hawaii Stanford. Are you kidding me? I'm betting that game for sure. I got a wedding that day, but I'll be betting that game.
Here we go. 1-800 don't gamble, baby. Kids. This is our you can see that there's some furniture missing from behind Clay. Used to be a really nice sofa there that got repossessed from thanks to DraftKings.
Well, you used to have a piano in your background. So what happened to that? Did you do some gambling too?
Lake House. It's at the Lake House. So
I bet on BetMGM. It's fantastic.
Is it? Okay, there you go. Somebody's getting paid on the side.
That's right. We are, of course, brought to you tonight by our friends over at Home Field Apparel, back for the 2025 season. You've heard us rave about them, talk about them for years, whether it be their collection of the T-shirts are great, plenty of Michigan basketball, Michigan football, some of the, I won't call them niche sports, but there's a couple other non-football, non-basketball. There's a hockey design in there. There's a couple baseball designs in there. Ever-growing collection of hats, as you can see here on screen. If you're watching the YouTube version, I see that I have that trucker hat. I have all this stuff. The reason I have all of it is, one, Home Field tends to be very friendly with what they share with us, but also I like it. I keep it around. It's part of my regular wardrobe, whether it's the joggers, whether it's Clayton's got a sweet coach's jacket, or crew necks, sweatshirts. It's all there. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Support a great company right in the heart of Big Ten country. I know they've just kicked off their can't miss kickoff initiative for this season. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com and load up. You've got less than a month now to completely re-outfit yourself for the Michigan football season. So no better place to do that than our friends over at Home Field Apparel. That's at homefieldapparel.com. I want to start. There's a couple things to talk about here. The coaches polls out today. Again, we talked to some coaches, some players, obviously the coordinators over the weekend. But I want to I want to get a temperature check from you two guys, because going into fall camp last year, there was the glow of, there still was that national title glow that had come, whatever it was, 7-8 months before that. There was so much new coaching staff, new support staff people, guys that hadn't played a ton stepping into these roles. And, there was part of you that you were optimistic that they'd be able to run it back because, Sherrone Moore being the coach meant the culture was going to stay intact. And it meant that a lot of these guys who would just kind of be taking the baton from some of those teams over the last 3 years. And I think that there was a little bit of a glow with the fall camp coverage. And obviously you see what happens on the field. They get off to a 5-5 start and rally late. But, I'm just curious now, like through what lens are you guys viewing some of the camp cover or some of the camp narratives this year? I think last year, to a certain extent, you were giving them the benefit of the doubt. You were hopeful. There were a lot of question marks. This team has a lot of question marks again, but the tone, it just seems like coming out of that building is completely different than last year's.
Well, last spring, I said it many times, they didn't have a quarterback, and everybody's like all excited about Alex Orji. And when people got mad when we broke the news that Davis Warren was actually emerging to start, we got called names and everything else, and it was ridiculous. But there was no, if you don't have a quarterback, guys, then you're going to struggle flat out. They had no quarterback, and that's what it was. I expected the offensive line to be better. I expected them to be better defensively early. And maybe we should have, because of the transition from the young guys to Wink Martindale, maybe we should have said, okay, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve here, guys getting to know each other. And that didn't happen right away. It was about 6 games in when, hey, it finally started to click. And then we saw the defense that we all expected to see, right? So, but without a quarterback, I don't know how you could have predicted that this team was going to compete for a title. And I don't think anybody did. I don't think any of us did, but we expected better than what we saw in some games. There were some red flags. And by the end of the year, everybody seemed much more comfortable, obviously. They seemed to be playing with a lot more confidence. The quarterbacks still weren't very good, but the defense was lights out and the running game was good enough. But to me, this is a long-winded answer, obviously, to your question, but we've heard good things about Juan Castillo, for example, coming over as an analyst and helping with the offensive line. And that is huge to me. I think that Grant Newsome struggled last year. Everybody admits it. I think Gio Elhadi basically told you guys that, especially him, he was getting used to being an offensive line coach for the first time. And it was, there's a learning curve. Should he have been the choice? I guess that's, it's up for debate, but we'll find out, right? Because he's got a couple of years here to prove himself still. It was the first year guy. But to me, so I'm tempering my enthusiasm, even though I know that there is talent up front. I know that there's good young talent. I think by the end of the year, this line should be good. I think the pieces are good enough, guys, for this line to be solid plus, if not better, even with the really young talent on this team. But I still have to see it. I still have to see it be coached well. And then all the good stuff that we're hearing about Jair Hill excites me. I'm still a little bit worried about the cornerbacks. Wink Martindale said it at the end of spring, he said it again in June to our John Borton. He said it, I think, at his first presser, that they wanted a little bit more depth there. So I have to see that to believe it too. So I'm right there with the coaches. I think this is a 9-3 football team, maybe number 14 in the country, right on the brink of a playoff berth if things go well. If Bryce Underwood's as good as we think he is, I think he will be much better than anybody we saw last year.
The coaches they're capping it at 9-3. Is that what?
No, but it was 14. No, not the Michigan coaches. I'm saying that the coaches poll.
Oh, the coaches poll. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, at 14th, they're buying Illinois. They're buying,
and they shouldn't be. We can get back to that in a minute.
We'll see. Yeah, and they're buying Ohio State still over Penn State, which I think is at least to start the year. We'll see. Ohio State's got a tough test week 1, but I think a year ago, the whole talking points and everything coming from Schembechler Hall was everything's the same. Nothing's going to change. We're going to continue to be the same program that we were, when in fact a lot had changed. It was a lot of new people when it came to the players. It was a lot of different players trying to be put into more elevated roles and, things that they hadn't done before. And Giovanni El-Hadi talked about it today from an offensive line standpoint where, he felt like things were a little bit hectic. He said stressful when it came to having a new position coach, having all new guys. I mean, their top 6 offensive linemen from the year before departed the program, and it was all new guys stepping into those roles. They've talked a lot about how the relationships weren't as tight as the guys like Zach Zinter and Carson Barnhart and Trevor Keegan, who were all playing together for years. So it just was different, as much as they didn't want it to be, or they didn't want to get word out there that it was, or maybe they just wanted to speak it into existence. And they still had an okay team, but it wasn't quite the same or anywhere near it. And no one expected, as you said, Chris, them to actually be the 2023 team in 2024. You start with losing Jim Harbaugh right there. You're not going to be the same. But, there were plenty other differences from there. But, I think, this year you have a quarterback that should be really, really good right away in Bryce Underwood. And that changes everything for what this team is. It showed you last year how important quarterback play is and not being one-dimensional offensively. So you can start right there. But the offensive line, sounds like they're a little bit more comfortable, and that could go a long way as well. It's really all about the offense. The defense, TJ Guy talking about it today, just the way that they've started from a much higher point with the continuity. The whole staff is back on that side of the ball. They should be good rocking and rolling right away. I think that defense is going to give them a hell of a shot to go down to Oklahoma and win. It's just how much the offense can produce and how quickly they can start producing in this season, because there are 2 big road games in September. Not every year has those on the schedule, but this year does. So you got to be ready for it.
Oh, it's 2 big road games in September and 3 huge road games, obviously, in your first 6 games. When you talk about Oklahoma and Nebraska and USC, I mean, that is not it's in the range of outcomes to start 3-3 this year if things kind of don't go your way early on. Now you look at the back half of that schedule, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for runway into that Ohio State game, which could ultimately be a play-in game for the playoff for Michigan, or a play-in game for both of those teams. Or who knows, if both teams get rolling, maybe they're playing for something a little bit more than just that. So it's incredibly important to get off to a good start. And I think that, the reason I asked the question I did at the start of the show in terms of, how you view it, and, do you take their word as gospel as coming out of fall camp? I think something that's become apparent to me really in the last few days, but maybe something you speculated about during the offseason, is I think that everyone in that building was a little bit caught off guard by how, everything was like pulling teeth in all 3 phases of the game, outside of Dominic Zavada's kicking in the first, 6-7 weeks of the season last year. I think that was a wake-up call for them. And, it allowed them to go into the offseason where, Sherrone Moore said it on signing day. This is 3 or 4 days after they win that game against Ohio State. One of the emphasis was going to be getting more physical and being more opposing at the point of attack. And, then you hear what Justin Tress says about the weight program a couple of weeks ago, and what Sherrone Moore said at media day. And then this roster comes out and you actually see these guys serious about changing their bodies and putting weight on, or losing weight, or just applying some of those lessons they learned last year. Everything just feels, I'm not going to say it's a well-oiled machine, because it's still very much a work in progress, but you get the sense that, not only, I'm not a huge believer in momentum season to season, but something happened in that last month of the year where it clicked for everyone, and they have used that as a springboard. And all you can really say about it is that they have set themselves up for a much better start to the year. And the schedule is not as challenging as last year's was, but it does challenge them in different ways, especially when you don't have the comfort early on of playing consecutive home games. They won't play a home game 2 weeks in a row this entire season. So, just from talking to the players that we have, and, the coordinators that spoke publicly, Sherrone speaking publicly, people speaking privately, it just, you don't say there's a weight off their shoulders, but you get the sense that everyone's sailing a little more in the same direction.
I think that they have adjusted, right? I think that the Ben Herbert loss was devastating to a lot of guys. In fact, I know it was. And speaking to some of the families, a lot of guys were talking after he told them that he was leaving and saying, okay, where are we going? What are we going to do? Are we going to transfer? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And they all decided to stick it out, and cooler heads prevailed. But it takes a while, right, to earn their trust. Justin Tress was really kind of viewed as a big brother type when I spoke to some of the players, and they said, Ben Herbert was a father figure. Justin Tress was a brother type. So he had to earn their respect. And I think he did that. And I think he's done that this summer. Looking at their bodies, fellas, we say this a lot, but when you look at some of these guys and what they've accomplished with their bodies, they look different. A few of these guys, especially the linemen. I think Gio El-Hadi said he gained 25 pounds of good weight. I think Greg Crippen did the same, at least 10 pounds, according to people in the building, said that he was very serious about his nutrition. Derek Moore is an absolute rock. Jayshon Barham is a freak. So there are guys out there who really put in the work, and there is that leadership that wants to prove that last year was a fluke, even though they had their moments. When you beat Ohio State and you beat Alabama to end the year, you're still 8-5, right? And that wasn't good enough for them. This is a program that is used to now playing in a playoff and competing for national championships. So there are enough guys left that are saying this is our goal and this is what we need to be. And now I think that they've got it back to where, okay, we are familiar with these coaches, this brand new coaching staff. It was a kick in the groin, guys, flat out, because we thought a lot more guys might stay. At least some of us did, thought a lot more guys might stay with Sherrone. And in fact, it was leaning that way before Jim Harbaugh took a lot of them with him. And you can't blame them. I was talking to somebody on the coast that said the stress level being at Michigan and recruiting in this environment is probably a 9, and they go out there, and Jim Harbaugh and these guys, it's probably a 2 now in the NFL, a 2 or a 3 compared to what they were in. So I don't blame them. At the same time, there's a getting used to process, and I think they did. And I think there are some good coaches on the staff. There are a couple guys that still need to prove themselves. I don't think there's any question about that. I love the Chip Lindsey hire. I went on record, guys, and saying that, okay, there are 3 or 4 guys that I have predicted success for here that I knew, okay, these guys are going to be really successful at Michigan. 3 of them were head coaches, John Beilein, Jim Harbaugh, and Dusty May. And I'm putting Chip Lindsey as a coordinator in that group. I really have a lot of confidence in him that he is going to be successful here. And I feel really good about it. So it's, as Chip said, it's up to the players. Players have to make plays, but he is a football savant. He is extremely bright. I think this offense is going to help the defense a lot more this year. I think they're going to get to 9-3. I think 10-2 is optimistic, but 9-3, I think, gets you to the cusp of the playoff. And to me, this year, that's good enough. Next year, you start competing for titles again.
Yeah, I mean, they need the offense to be a hell of a lot better than it was a year ago. And Wink Martindale is kind of dancing around that subject a little bit on Saturday when he was talking about how they need complementary football. And he mentioned good punting that they had in Baltimore, how much that helped his defense. And Michigan, honestly, needs a lot better out of the punt game than they got last season. But clearly, the main thing is complementary football, offense to defense. The offense can help the defense probably more than any position unit can help, or phase of the game can help another, because it has to do with field position. Points on the board, that just decreases margin or increases margin for error for the defense in general, that they don't feel like the entire game is on them and they have to get a stop every single time they're on the field. If you have a longer drive, they get more rest. They stay fresh. I mean, the 2023 defense, it felt like there were times when they were on the sideline for such a long time, they were able to come out there, get a quick 3 and out. Next thing you know, McCarthy and Corum and those guys are back on the field. So they don't need to be, the best Michigan team ever, or arguably, but they have to be somewhere in between what they were last year and what they were in some of the better years that they had, really good offenses, great offenses here. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. The vibe from the fan base this year, back in 2021, coming off of a terrible year, which was completely different. So you can't really compare it to anything. Anytime you wrote anything that a player or coach said that was positive, people would be like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it, whatever. We hear this every year. Now, if you write it, people are like, inject it into my veins. If you put out a poll or a prognostication from somebody on what Michigan's going to be this year, a lot of the fan base is saying this team is underrated. They're going to show people the defense is going to be elite. The offense is going to be much improved. So none of it really matters, the talk heading into the year, but the vibe from the fan base is like, hey, we're going to be pretty damn good. So we'll see. But it's kind of exciting. And hey, I don't mind getting less mean tweets under the articles. It's a little bit of a perk here this year compared to some other years where there's increased skepticism.
Wear it as a badge of honor. Twitter is a cesspool.
All right.
And by the way, the team's off social media now too. They're on
good for them.
They're
That's
locked
a step in
in.
the right direction. If you have children, I wouldn't let them be on Twitter either. A bunch of nut jobs. Anyway,
that is true. Hey, you know what? Bad engagement is still engagement, though, and that's we'll take the eyeballs, I guess.
I'll take hate clicks all day, baby. Come on.
I'll take your hate clicks. We get a lot of hate watches too. I know there are some hate watchers out there right now.
Come on, let's go.
Here we go. Here we go. Matthew Hutchinson in the YouTube chat says, "I'll send more mean tweets to you, Clay. Sorry, I'm slacking." That's our former producer here on the Wolverine.
We should do
a Penn State fan.
We should do a mean tweets version, right?
We should.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So we'd have to comb through those, though. Those could get pretty personal.
Thank you, Hutch.
Yeah. Well, how about
see you, Hutch?
We'll do
James
that.
Franklin,
and
James Franklin's still a fraud, Hutch, but we love you.
Mean tweets and mean DMs. That would we'd sell some subs off that, I'm sure. I want to get into what the coordinator said a little bit over the weekend, and we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. And a couple things that I honed in on. Chip Lindsey, more or less, I won't say locking in some of the numbers at each position, but it sounds like at wide receiver, they're looking for 6 guys there to kind of step up. Lindsey says that that's a group that they need this year. They need to be much better. So they're looking for 6 guys there on the offensive line. You're probably looking for 8 guys. He said 3 tackles, 3 guards, and 2 centers, but they might have the numbers for more of that. So those were two of the things he spoke on that I sort of locked into. Of course, a talking point of late has been, does Mikey Keene have enough time to win the Michigan quarterback job? There's always going to be hype for Bryce Underwood and Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. But what do we think about the numbers and the expectations at both of those positions that I just mentioned?
Worried about receiver a little bit. I'll be honest, right? Donovan McCulley's your number one. He kind of got passed over last year at Indiana, no matter how you slice it, right? I don't know what the reasoning was for it. And the Michigan defensive backs love him and say that he's going to be a fantastic player. So beyond that, what is there that's proven? And there's really not a whole lot, right? And that's what concerns you a little bit. I go back to the days of, and I say it all the time, Steve Breaston, Jason Avant, and Braylon Edwards being on the field together at the same time, an NFL receiving core. There were all kinds of Michigan receivers in the NFL, and that really tapered off. And they showed that if you've got every other piece, and I wrote this, I think, just 2 or 3 days ago, if you've got every other piece, you can still win a natty, right? Roman Wilson was good. He wasn't great. And Cornelius Johnson, same thing. He had an elite tight end, though, when you had Colston Loveland. So, but I want guys that are making contested catches that, there's a wow play. There's another wow play. This is if it's one-on-one, your guy's going to win it. And I don't think they've had that in a long, long time. So that, to me, I don't see it happening this year either, to be honest with you. Now, some of these freshmen are going to be really good. And I think that's going to change now that Bryce Underwood is here. I think people are going to come and play with him. But as of this year, you're hoping, hope springs eternal, as Lloyd Carl used to say, hope springs eternal, when you used to ask him questions in the fall, is Gabe Watson going to be, this is a year for Gabe Watson? Hope springs eternal. So that we don't know. I like Kendrick. I think we've been kind of sleeping on Kendrick Bell a little bit. He's got that Bell DNA, and hopefully he can step up and maybe elevate his game, be another big receiver for them. But to me, that's the biggest question mark.
You know what I want to see more than I want to see contested catches? Guys getting open. We didn't see it enough last year. And then even when guys were open, they weren't found down the field, or, the pressure was too much for the quarterback to handle, and they bail out of the pocket and didn't stand in there. I mean, there were all sorts of issues with the timing, the chemistry, the talent level in both of those rooms last year. So, yeah, I think people know where I stand on the wide receivers, including Donovan McCulley. He's got to prove it. I think he could be very, very good. You heard great things about the way that he's performed in practice and workouts since he's gotten to campus, and the way he's led. But the issue for him has been consistency. You got to see it for, hopefully 16 games, 17 games, if you need it. So you have to do it on if you're going to be the number one and wearing number one, you got to deliver each and every week. You got to be that guy. You got to be as dependable as possible. And other guys need to step up around you. You can't do it all on your own. But yeah, I think it was interesting what Chip Lindsey said about bringing in Jake Garcia, the transfer from East Carolina, was a little bit different than how Sherrone Moore talked about it at Big Ten Media Day. He said that he was very concerned about, and paraphrasing here, about Mikey Keene's status at the time that they took Jake Garcia's commitment. But he did say they wanted to add another body in there anyway. And that's kind of how we interpreted it when we talked about it on this show back in June when he was added to the roster. So they're all going to be given a fair shake. But, I've said it since before Mikey Keene went down with the injury. I just don't see a way that Bryce Underwood doesn't win this job because I think he's that good. So I think it's going to be him back there and, got to develop in good receiving core. You have to have a better offensive line that can protect you. And that includes the offensive line paving the way in the run game to have a productive run game. That's going to help out the pass protection in the pass game because you're not going to be in more obvious passing situations and things of that nature. So it all works together. But those two rooms, you feel good about what Underwood can be, although he's going to be young. And then it's the wide receiving core. Can they step up and make enough plays when they have to? Because you don't want everything to have to be perfect for you to move the ball and score points. Sometimes there's going to be a ball not thrown, perfectly, or Underwood's going to have to throw it as he's getting hit or something like that. If someone can make a play, grab that thing out of the air, that's going to go a long way to kind of erase some of those mistakes that you're going to have when you have some young guys on offense running the show.
Somebody over here says, I don't like the Roman Wilson hate. I said Roman Wilson was really good. Compared to past Michigan receivers, he's not in that upper echelon. I am not negating Roman Wilson's role in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying he was not elite. He was not a great Michigan receiver. He's a very good Michigan receiver, but he was not a difference maker. And Michigan has had those in the past. I want to make that clear over here. For some reason, I can't get these questions to come up, but for whoever's saying that over there. But one other thing, too, when it comes to Underwood, when I was talking to people close to the program in the spring, even when Keene wasn't playing, they said, hey, follow the money, right? We've got this kid that the sooner we get him on the field and get him experience, the sooner he's going to be a superstar here in Bryce Underwood. So that makes sense to me. Now, at the same time, could I say if Underwood were to struggle at Oklahoma, fellas, Mikey Keene maybe come in to give him a shot in the arm or something like that? Say Bryce Underwood goes out there and throws a couple picks or something like that, and you've got a guy with experience who's played a lot of games in Mikey Keene, and he's healthy. Do you turn to him and say, hey, Bryce, this is nothing against you. We're going to give Mikey a shot, see what he does, if we're down, 10 points or something like that? I could absolutely see something like that happening. But I'm with you, Clay. I think this is Bryce Underwood's show. I think it should be. I think he's shown his unbelievable arm. It is amazing, right, how much better receivers look when the ball gets there in a hurry compared to a ball that takes, a little bit longer to get there on an out route or something like that. And we saw that in the spring, too. He made some of those receivers look a lot better than they were. So excited to see the Bryce Underwood era here.
In throwing guys open, too, like
right.
Being able to – and maybe it's using his legs, using his athleticism to find a throwing window to get the ball there. I will say I think Roman Wilson had a great year. I wouldn't describe his entire career as great, but – the plays he made in the Rose Bowl, things like that in the stats, and he was kind of the go-to guy. I would put him not elite, but I thought it was a great season considering they didn't throw the ball that much and they didn't play deep into the games a lot of the times as starters. But 789 yards, 12 touchdowns. It's up there with kind of, some of these other really good receiver seasons.
I want to go back to the quarterbacks for a second because I think Chip Lindsey over the weekend made a pretty important distinction. I think we focus a lot on when they say quarterback battle and that, the who's going to be the starter. And I think we're all pretty universal here in that it's going to be Bryce Underwood. I feel pretty confident saying that, but also, and pardon my French, sometimes shit happens. Chip Lindsey talked about a year at Arizona, even last year at North Carolina, the starter they had got injured right off the bat, season-ending injury. And the guy who wound up being the starter for them down the stretch was the guy who was the third quarterback coming out of fall camp. There was a year when he was at Arizona State where due to injuries, and this is obviously the max extreme of it, they played 5 quarterbacks because of injuries. So it's less about, who is the biggest threat to Underwood to win the job and more, okay, if something happens, how many of these guys are playable? you're pretty confident that if something happens, Mikey Keene is at least playable. Jake Garcia has had some time, as a starter between a couple of different schools. And Davis Warren's not in the mix right now. Davis Warren's still working his way back from injury. Jaden Davis, I know that, he's putting his head down and he's going to work, and I give him credit for that, but you probably don't add a second transfer this summer if you're fully confident in your quarterback room and having that amount of playable guys. So, you don't want to be in a situation like you were, and I've used this comparison on the show before, but, think back to that when Denard Robinson got hurt at Nebraska and Devin Gardner was playing wide receiver. He didn't have a backup quarterback if something went wrong. So, I don't put too much stock into, can Mikey Keene actually win the job? Or, is Jake Garcia a threat for the job? Or whatever it is. Like, you just need, I think, across the roster, you need guys in your two deep where if something happens, I can put this guy in the field and we can still function as a football team. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from.
And I don't think Garcia is that guy. Didn't he get beaten out by Caton Hauser last year, if I'm not mistaken? So that kind of tells you all you need to know. I'm sure he's got some physical skills. They've said he's got some physical skills, but he's an insurance policy basically, and kind of a breaking glass in case of emergency type of guy. So, but I do think Mikey Keene is capable, if he's healthy. And somebody asked over here, have we confirmed that he's back and throwing? He's very close. He's very close to being 100%. And he told us, I think he told us during our podcast, fellas, that he was getting right on the right track, and he's feeling much better about it. So, and he has made strides since then, from what we understand. So that's the answer to that question. And it's nice to have him to push Bryce Underwood and to help him. What an unbelievable young man. When we talk to him, he just seems like a leader, and he seems like a perfect fit for that quarterback room. And Jaden Davis really does too. If he doesn't play a down here at Michigan, a meaningful down here at Michigan, he handles himself extremely well. This is a quarterback room that is together, not divided, and I think that's important. There have been divided quarterback rooms here before, and it kind of divides the team too. So that's not going to happen with this bunch. And I think that everybody, as Anthony said, understands that the future and probably the present is Bryce Underwood, but it would be disrespectful to the other guys to say, hey, it's Bryce and these other guys suck or something like that. So you're not going to hear that. But what you are going to hear and what you are going to see is somebody over here said, oh, Bryce Underwood has already proven himself to be, like a 4-year guy. And he's so on. That's just Trevor Lawrence. You can't predict that. You cannot predict that until we see it in a game. That's kind of a silly, with all due respect, that's kind of a silly statement. How do we know his football knowledge is as good as a 4-year starter? We don't. And there were some things that he needed to improve on in the spring that we saw. Right. So at the same time, he's got the potential to be really, really good. So we are with you. Is as athletic as Vince Young. So does that mean they're going to let him run, fellas? I thought that was interesting. And I think that's something that we should talk about too, what Sherrone Moore said at Media Day about that.
Yeah, he could be what Trevor Lawrence was as a freshman.
Could be,
but at Clemson. Yeah, it's very possible. It would be incredible. And Trevor Lawrence had a better team around him that year. They went undefeated and won the national championship. So that certainly helps, because then you can step in with a lot of things around you. I think Bryce Underwood's going to have to do more than Trevor Lawrence did that year. But if you dropped in freshman year Trevor Lawrence into this team, there's a chance that hypothetical player on that hypothetical team, would be at the same level as Bryce Underwood is now. I think, I think he's a hell of a player already as a true freshman. I don't know how you can be more knowledgeable or as knowledgeable as a 4-year starter, because there's just no substitute for actually being out there in a game with just massive individuals trying to bring you to the ground violently, and seeing, the mind games that you're going to be, they're going to be out there when you're trying to dissect defenses and make decisions on the fly while there are a bunch of people screaming either for you or against you. So I don't know about that part, but I think the talent is there. And if he is that level of player, I mean, they're winning their first few games and they're going to look like a damn good team.
It's important to, and I've written this more than a few times this offseason in terms of the consensus kind of seems to be that he is maybe the best true freshman quarterback recruit that's come out since a Trevor Lawrence. But Clayton, you hit on it there. Like Trevor Lawrence stepped into an infrastructure of a team that was ready to win a national title. Offensively, I think a lot has to go right for Michigan to be at that level. In fact, every single thing has to go right for that to be the case this year. And I think we know that's not reality. Like football can be fickle. You always have injuries, and maybe guys don't pan out the way that you hope they would. Some guys that you didn't expect much from will break out and potentially be stars. But I think the objective for Michigan with him this year is you got to find your baseline as an offense, and then how much does his presence alone elevate that baseline? This needs to function. This needs to, this isn't a 1-year play for him either. Obviously, if he's as good as you think he can be, it's hopefully a 3-year play. And maybe there's a fourth year in there somewhere if Michigan's loaded and the right set of circumstances bring him back to school. But, you need to get him a nice baseline to build off of heading into 26 and 27, which feels like a much more attainable championship window. Not to say that I think that probably the ceiling of what this Michigan team is, and this is if everything goes right, is about what that Notre Dame team was last year. But when Notre Dame got to the national title game, just wasn't what they were doing, just wasn't quite enough. I think it's going to take
blitzing like crazy. Blitzing like crazy and giving Jeremiah Smith one-on-one coverage. Yeah, that was awesome.
Well, that was pretty stupid. But, they were kind of one of those lunch pail type of teams too. And again, I think that's the most positive end of the outcomes for Michigan this year. There's a couple of years of development, a couple of years of war chesting. And to go back to the original point, Chris wanted to talk about, should Michigan run this guy? I think he's too good a dual threat guy to not run him. Now, I'm not running him like Lenora Sellers or like Lamar Jackson, but I think you can do some of the things that they wanted to do with Alex Orji, and you have the arm to actually make those plays when the defense loads the box and things like that. So I think that there is a path where he can run 5, 6, 7 times a game. And with one or both of those backs on the field, that's, this run game is still going to be the engine that makes this thing go this year.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as Sherrone said, he goes, well, those defensive guys are bigger than him too. He could still get hurt. You better have 2 quarterbacks. So, but at the same time, if you're doing your offense a disservice if you don't open it up. This guy is just too good with his legs to not let him do some stuff. And he talked about JJ McCarthy. He said, JJ was always asking me if I could do that. And I said, no, and we need you to stay healthy. JJ was not built like Bryce Underwood, number one, right? Number two, he's as good as JJ was with the ball. I think Bryce Underwood's better in terms of being a pure runner. So that's going to be something. I don't think, obviously we aren't expecting Sherrone Moore to give away the state secrets and the game plans to all these games. And I do think that he was probably, there are going to be times where they run him. They're going to have to, and some of these big games, then, you're going to have to turn them loose if you want to win these big games, some of these road games that are going to determine your season. There are 4 swing games on the schedule. You win 2 of them, you're in the playoff, and you have a possibility, guys, of going to the Big Ten championship game. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him. And again, a lot of this is going to come down to the offensive line too. A big year for these guys. But to me, you make it easier for them if you give them more options too. And one thing that Fred Jackson, Michigan analyst, told me was that Chip Lindsey is not going to be predictable. There are going to be RPOs, run pass options. He said that there are going to be times, when in the past Michigan has run into a stacked line on 3rd and 3 saying, okay, stop us, where Chip's going to do something different. He said he is an extremely smart guy. We've seen him, what he's done with his offenses everywhere he's been. I don't expect him to change that just because Michigan has a run first place. And you saw at North Carolina last year what he did with the running game and the last couple of years. So there are ways to do things differently where it's still a run-heavy offense, and I think you're going to see that from him. Somebody over here asked about screen passes too. I asked Chip about that this spring in a one-on-one, and he said they have an extensive playbook when it comes to that. And I think they've got the backs that are capable of doing that, not bubble screens to receivers, but with the running backs. So Chris, I think you're going to be pleased with what you see from Chip Lindsey in that respect as well. We've been pining for that for a long time too. I know it gets overplayed and that there are these certain fan angles that everybody likes to bring up. Why don't we ever run a screen pass? Why don't we ever do that? But I 100% agree with you on that. And I expect that to be a part of I didn't say he relies on screens. John, what does that mean? John, Chris, no way. He relies on screens. And yes, even running back screens. Yes, that's exactly what I just said.
I think he was responding to another commenter.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
There's some craziness going on over there. But yeah,
what's going on? I can't keep up.
We're going to get to the questions in the chat soon.
Yep.
There's some back and forth going on over there. I think it's important. And first off, on the screens, Samaj Morgan probably hopes another screen is never called for him the rest of his college career.
I would just run into the back of his blocker too. All right. Next.
Yeah,
that's some great plays on screen. He should want the ball. They haven't had a great screen coach since Jed Fish was here, right, who is a great screen coach and caught Michigan on a couple of them last year. Here's the thing about screens, though, is Michigan got so many ran on them the last couple of years because the defense was so good and you couldn't do a ton else. So it's kind of a balance, but those screen works better if you can do other things and they're not expecting it as much. If you can run the ball well, if you can use all parts of the field in the pass game as well. And then you hit them with the screen, and then it's like, you're making these big linemen to run sideline to sideline, and you got them their heads in a pretzel there. But I will just point out on the rushing part of Bryce Underwood, Chip Lindsey's calling the plays, and Chip Lindsey runs his quarterback more than Sherrone Moore did. That's been proven. Drake May in 2023 had 3.4 design rush attempts per game. And in the red zone is where you want to even up the numbers. And, when the field shrinks a little bit, 25 rushes in the red zone for 66 yards, 9 touchdowns with 11 first downs. He was, a threat in that part of the field. Amorian Hampton 2 years ago, that same season, had 52 red zone rush attempts. So 52 for him, 25 for Drake May. He was very much a threat when they were both in the game together in those key downs. And I think Underwood is going to be the same thing. He's a better athlete than Drake May. As much as Drake May is a really good athlete, you're going to have to see it. You're going to have to see it. It's going to be part of this offense.
Well, part of it too is, it's not like playing, and even in the video game, you have to make reads, but it's not like playing a video game where you decide you're going to run Bryce Underwood and you call a pass play and you decide to scramble instead, or you call, a design quarterback. Like that's still a read that you in real life, like you have to make on the field. And you're part of his development is learning how to read college defenses. Now, when it comes to option and run game stuff, I'm not going to say it's basic, but those are a lot of concepts that they do teach in high school football. So maybe that's an aspect of his game that you exploit early until he has that advanced knowledge in the passing game. And then maybe you run him a little bit less as his career goes on. But I think in terms of this year's offense, that 1,000% should be something they look at here. I want to move over to defense before we get into questions. Wink, he cracks me up. He comes to the podium Saturday and says, yeah, I'm in a good mood today, but we haven't really put up the pads on yet. So If you would have talked to me next week, I probably wouldn't have been in such a good mood. But something I took away from him, Michigan feels like it, and this has been talked about before. They feel like they have, quote unquote, third starters at both edge and linebacker. Cam Brandt is a guy that we talk about players that have changed their body and that are in the mix. He's going to be right up there with Derek Moore and TJ Guy in that rotation. It kind of seems like he's more or less locked into that number 3 pass rusher role. They're still waiting on Dom Nichols to become a little bit better of a run defender, but I think those are your 4. And there's some good competition, for spots 5 and beyond there. But and at linebacker, Jimmy Rolder, someone who the staff has been high on before. We've talked about how one of the subplots of this year is that you're going to lose both pass rushers after this season. You're going to lose both starting linebackers. So who are those guys that step up between them and then take the baton for next year? Both of those guys are at the front of that pecking order and are going to be impact players this year, it seems like.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when Wink Martindale says we're going to be leaning more on our linebackers and have 3 linebacker sets at times when Jimmy Wolder is going to be on the field with the 2 starters, because that's a strength. When I look at that defensive line, which they think is going to be fantastic because of the depth, and there's some star power. I think Derek Moore is a borderline going to be a star. We'll see. But there are guys, plenty of capable bodies up front, and that you're saying that about your linebackers really gets me excited about that group. I think Cole Sullivan is a guy that they talk about too, where they have more depth there. And I asked Sherrone more about this at Media Day. Do you have more depth there than since you've been at Michigan? And he went back a couple of years and he named like 2 or 3 guys, but I think there are 4, maybe 5 guys here, depending, that can really be in the mix. So you have 3 or 4 starters, which is fantastic, and a couple of guys that are going to be off the charts. Good. You saw Jayshon Barham last year really come on at the end of the year after struggling at times early in the year. So that excites me a ton. So I just, with Wink Martindale, he's always honest, fellas, and that's what I love about him. And when he talks about cornerback depth, and the fans are getting all excited and a little bit nervous. Well, what are you talking about? We got this, and this. And he's like, well, we don't have a lockdown. And he said, we have some guys that need to mature. And one of the things that excited me today was listening to guys talk about Jair Hill and saying that he has really improved and that he is really dialed and focused. But we'll see. That has to be the case. You got beat on some double moves last year, and he's had some issues off the field. But if he can be that guy, then in my opinion, this defense goes from here to another level. And I think that's a possibility. So, and of course, Rod Moore coming back too. Didn't Wink say that he's not sure when to expect him back, just that he's going to get him back at some time? And Rod did tell us he wasn't sure if it was going to be game 1, 2, or 3. But to me, that raises the ceiling a whole nother level as well.
And to speak to Wink's honesty, he said, I could give you the BS answer and say he's right on schedule. What's the schedule? I don't know, but he's right on schedule. And you got to love that too. He's wondering like the rest of us. And he said that he pulled Rod aside the other day and said, hey, I want you to come back like when you're ready, whether that's playing him some snaps in a game when he does return, but not too many to kind of ease him back in, whatever is the best for him. And, the schedule's not quite what it was in 2023 when you could do that with both Rod Moore and Will Johnson, both of whom were coming off of injuries. But either way, it's, if he's not healthy enough, you have some other options back there. And then when he is 100% and he's Rod Moore again, he's clearly the best option because he's a difference maker. He's one of the better defensive backs in the country. So if we get that at some point this season, that's going to be a huge plus for Michigan. But it's tools in the toolbox. They have them in the front 7 when you talk about Dom Nichols. Okay, maybe he's not as good of a run defender, but he can go out there and get after the passer. Cam Brandt has really emerged as a starter level, like you say, Anthony. And then Jimmy Rolder, maybe they will play 3 linebackers at times this year. You're not going to do it against USC in Washington and Oklahoma, but you might do it against Wisconsin, who's going back to more of a traditional style of offense. You may do it against some of the teams like Northwestern or whoever else that are going to run heavier packages. And when you're in a bigger conference with a bunch of different styles of football that are out there, like we saw last season, you got to play with a dime linebacker some games. In some games, you got to play with, 5 down linemen or 3 down and 2 stand-up edges. So it's, just being able to have that depth so you can play different ways is important. I think they have it in the front 7, but when you look at cornerback and nickel and, adding up, those numbers there, maybe not quite there yet, but they do have 3-4 weeks before the season. And then some games into the year where you can get guys experience to build that up.
Any other thoughts on the defense before questions here?
No, I'm going to get a little disturbed by some of the comments over here on the right. So,
did you just? I just. That's why you don't read the comments.
I think somebody's being trolled, or we have a stalker situation here. So we'll get the authorities on this.
Wow.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to this one from Michigan.
Neff?
Michigander.
James Neff. That's what I want to know. Is James Neff?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that's
a great guy.
Yeah, come on. I got a quiche in the oven. Let's get this moving here. Michigander 1212 says, what is the talk on Nathan Afobe? I'm hearing a lot about Babs, Gio, and Sprague. Not much on Greg and on Nate.
Crippen has had a great summer. I'll tell you that right now. Speaking to people, he really took his craft seriously and really got bigger and stronger. Afobe is in the mix at right guard. A lot of people are thinking if Babalola wins the left tackle position. Then Evan Link slides over to right guard. And a lot of people think right guard or guard is his best position. They said flat out, we have 10 guys or so that we are experimenting with, and we are going to get the 5 that played best together. And it doesn't matter the position, and go with that. So I think by the end of the year, it's going to be hard to keep Babalola off the field. Ty Haywood, I think, is an absolute going to be a stud at some point too. But that's where things are. Afobe had a really, really good spring. And speaking with Chip Lindsey in the spring, he said he was told he had by far his best spring here. He's got the physical tools. He's got the skills. Everybody who's seen him from day one says he's just a massive human being who can move people. So it's just a matter of putting it together.
Yeah, he's got to be one of the strongest guys on that offensive line. And TJ Guy mentioned him today as the offensive lineman that's really caught his eye the most so far in spring ball. They've only been in pads. I think it was still just one time at the time we talked to them this afternoon, because it was Saturday and then Sunday off and then practice, I assume, later than when we talked to them today, but because people were trickling in the building. But, so that'll determine a lot of it. But he was getting a little bit of praise there. I do wonder, Chip Lindsey talks about having 3 tackles. If you move Evan Link away from that position, then 2 of your 3 primary guys are true freshmen. That would be kind of concerning. Andrew Babalola, and then the other one would be a redshirt freshman. Andrew Babalola, Ty Haywood, true freshman, and then the other one, redshirt freshman, Andrew Sprague. So I think you got to keep him at tackle. I think he'll probably start the year, and then Babalola rotates in the Michigan method, and maybe eventually he wins the job. And it seems like there are no shortage of guys at right guard who are in the mix. We'll see how good they are. That was the problem last year. Oh, you name off a bunch of guys. All right, there's your O-line. Sherrone Moore's still on staff. It's like, no, but how good are these guys? Because they haven't had experience. So at least some of those guys, including Crippen and El Hadi and, even Evan Link got some snaps and Sprague in the bowl game. Some of them have played now, so we can at least, we've seen them play. We have a basis of reference with those guys. But Afobe's one we don't, but you're hearing, some pretty good things.
I'd be worried if Link was the full-time starter at left tackle for the whole year. I'll put it on record. So I don't know that that'll be the case. Maybe he's improved to a ton, but man, I still have nightmares about some of the right tackle play last year.
Yeah, he did not play well.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it wasn't good. So I guess the question becomes, do you take the lumps with a guy who you have 13 games of game film on, or a 5-star that you have quite an investment in over the next few years? So be interesting to see. This is from Chris Caparone, who says, is it me, or does Bryce Underwood put more loft on deep balls than any Michigan QB since Gerback? Tough to say, because we've only seen him once, other than his high school film, but it's effortless, and there's a lot of arc and loft on it on some of those plays at Belleville.
I saw a loft out of the end zone on a wide open receiver in the spring game, right? So it happens. Remember when they said J.J. McCarthy couldn't throw the deep ball, Clay? What happened? So
the kid couldn't throw the deep ball.
Exactly. He's going to be. He's got great touch on the ball. There's no question about it. Throws a very catchable ball. So we'll find out. But that's an interesting comparison, though. And also, Chris, you're showing your age, so welcome.
Yeah, I don't have all the measurements in front of me of the exact height and all that. Yeah, McCarthy, though, one of the things he had to adjust to when he, started to get more experience was, if you have a wide open guy, put a little more air under it, because he has some room here to get the football. There's not a defender right near him. Underwood seems to have those trajectories down a little bit. I even was watching one of JJ's press conference from this offseason. That's something he's still working on. So Underwood, it seems a little more natural for him, which is huge. And now you got to get, you got to get the guys that can come down with those footballs, because it could mean some big plays for Michigan this year. And 2026, 2027 could be fun.
Corey G wants to know, question, fellas, have y'all interviewed Jayshon Barham? I've never seen him talk, or does he not do interviews? He is a bit of an enigma. We have not talked to him, and no one at Maryland talked to him either. So that'll be interesting for him when he gets to the NFL. But no, we have not talked to Jayshon Barham.
Yeah, it's weird. There's some of those guys that are really bold when they get in front of a microphone. Maybe he's one of them. And it's like, says things that the coaches don't want him to say. I remember Ron Bellamy taking Samaj Morgan with his shades on aside at the Rose Bowl and have a little talking to before he met with the media, basically kind of telling him what not to say type of thing. So, and that's just speculation, but I'm sure we'll get him at some point. If not, we'll request him and we'll see what they say.
I'm sure we won't get him at some point. It doesn't sound like this is
really
going to happen. He never talked at Maryland. He won't talk now. And his teammates say he's very, very quiet, which you wouldn't expect out of a middle linebacker. And Ernest Hausman was talking about him at Big Ten Media Day, saying that one of the things he likes the most about Jayshon Barham is that he trusts him to kind of tell him, what the call is, communicate to the other guys. Like Ernest feels like he just has that on his shoulders and he's fine with that from that spot instead of both of them doing it. It just might not be in his MO. And I know Brian Jean Mary talked last spring about we're trying to get him to be a little bit more. I think we lost Chris. Technical difficulty potentially, but they were trying to get him to be a little more vocal.
Went off.
The quiche in the oven. They were trying to get him to be more vocal, and I'm sure he has a little bit, but it just might not be his personality, which kind of makes sense. Like that, there's a guy every now and then that is that quiet, even on a football team, which can be a rambunctious group. I
kind of respect it.
Yeah.
Some guys just don't have anything to say, or it's not for them. And I mean, like I said, if at some point, if he's in the NFL, there might be some sort of media edict, but
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah. But hey, I just want to see him play well. I thought he played probably his best 4 games of the year in the last 4 or 5 games of the year. So excited to see what he does. We'll take this one and get out of here from SoCal for you, Mish, who wants to know how big of an impact is the coach suspension rule change going to be? Not leading practice for 2 to 4 weeks is a major concern. That's, of course, in reference to a potential suspension for Sherrone Moore, which at this point, things are quiet on that front. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and even he said we have a plan. He said, but I'm not going to comment or put it in place, obviously, until we see what happens for sure. But I think for sure there will be at least 2 games. We are hearing still the second or third week of August, and that it will come down to a suspension for Sherrone Moore. Will they appeal if it's 6 or 4 games and then try to take it into next year after the appeal? Maybe. So I don't know. But that's basically what we're hearing right now. And we'll see what happens. But it would be big because you wouldn't have your head coach. Do I have faith in Chip Lindsey and Wink Martindale as coordinators? Absolutely, I do. Chip Lindsey, though, is a first-year guy. The thing I can say about him, though, is he has the respect of everybody in that building. He feels like he's been here for a long time, even with the accent. So it's going to be very interesting to see who it will be. I still believe it will be the coordinators if it's 2 games, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, or go one guy, one half, the other guy.
Right. No, don't do that. Not against a good team. No, let's just do games by game this time.
He probably thinks he joined a pro Chip Lindsey. That is, he's like, God, it's great, but everyone I work with has this strong Midwest accent. I'm an outlier there. So,
but yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it's devastating that there's this new rule is in place. It's completely different.
I wouldn't say devastating, Clay, because devastating would mean like it's a sure loss. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think it's a sure loss, but to not have your head coach for an entire week and multiple weeks because you're coming off a game, right? You got to evaluate that game and then move on, set the game plan, set the tone for the next week. To not have him for either of those things, potentially for 2 weeks is going to be really difficult. I would, if he does get more games, appeal it, drag it out as long as possible into the next season, because a full month, let's say it was 4 games, that would be crazy. Like 4 months, no contact at all would be, insane, especially because he didn't do anything wrong. But, even just if he did do something wrong, 4 weeks without your head coach is brutal.
I would agree. We'll end on that note tonight. I think my oven just dinged. I think my quiche is done as well. So,
all right.
Productive week. We'll be in the building a couple more times this week. So a lot to sift through as fall camp moves into its second week, its first full week, of course, of practices and whatnot. Be sure to like this video, Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more, whether it's podcasts, whether it's clips from the shows, whether it's press conferences, it's all there for you. So like this video, subscribe. Most people who watch videos do not subscribe. So take a second right now while it's on your mind to do it. It's going to be very helpful for us. And also use that promo code UM1, which gets you 2 months of access to our site for only $1. For Chris Ballas, Clayton Safey, our producer Megan behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broom. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.